Hey folks, today we're going to be talking about glass gap heaters. Basically what that means is, exactly what it sounds, is there's a gap between two pieces of glass, and one of them or both of them are heated, and the air travels between them. So in the case of, say, vaponic, long test tube, another long inner tube, and then heat is applied, and the air comes in, picks up the heat, down into the tube where your herb is. And so this is one configuration. The UBI is one that actually is completely sealless, doesn't have any seal between the two pieces. The Vaponic and some others have some O-rings here. The other configuration is you have like a 19mm joint, and then that's joint is your interface. Then you need some holes down here at the air in. And then again, you have your heat coming in, the air coming in, picking up the heat, bringing it down into the tube where your herb is. So there's a couple things on these two configurations that I really wanted to address in my design. One is this has to be extremely long because the heat's getting applied, but it can't heat to the point where the O-rings get hot, because then they'll melt and off gas and bad things will happen. So you have to have this long distance, and this has to stay obviously hot. Down here has to stay cold. So what happens is you continue a drain of energy from the hot into the cold. So it's not very efficient. The device will cool off fast because of this added heat sink. It has to happen to keep this cool. Similar thing with the 19mm configuration is all this glass down here to make this connection. It's quite long, and it takes a lot of mass, and so you really can't feasibly heat this entire thing. You can only heat the tip, and then again you've got hot, and then it's bleeding off to this cold heat sink that's built in. And then the other thing that I just really didn't care for here is that to make this secure, you have to put a keg clip, and that's kind of clunky. And so what I ended up doing initially is the 5DD. So I was hoping that this was going to be an elegant solution here, where you have your looking down at the stem down here. There's two slight swells and two divots where there's pinched in. So on the stem you have those little bulges, and then on the cap you can see that it's has a slight oval to it. It's also slightly pinched. And so the idea there is that you would twist this just that to line up the low spot on the cap, the high spot on the 5DD. And so there were some problems with that. The number one is it's kind of finicky to get it to line up, and then even when you do, it's somewhat easy to vibrate off. And so there really wasn't a great sense of security that the cap was on there well. So that was something that was an issue. And then it really was too free-flowing. There wasn't really any back pressure. You really want to create a vacuum in the low chamber to have optimal vapor. And so this also really didn't control the inlet resistance to the right degree, and really we realized the 5DD, we're no longer offering it as direct to mouth because it's just a lot of heat in this cap to get it to work correctly, and the vapor is quite immense, and a water piece is a good idea for that, and it's just just didn't feel right having this 800-degree piece of glass up near my face. So those are the critical things that really killed the 5DD, but really the technology is superfluous. And so what ended up happening next was this, which is the 5DE, the DAB.erb. And so how this works is your cap has a stainless steel mesh shim in it. And so that grabs on to the bumps in the cap as it slides on. It'll stop off on the bumps, and there's also a divot here, and this helps allow some air in past the cap shim, but the cap shim also provides some back pressure so that there's a negative pressure in the load chamber. It's optimal really for vaporizing. And what it actually does, which is kind of neat, is when it's installed, the shim is in this area, contacting off between the cap and the stem, and so if you apply more heat here, you're going to get more conduction, and if you apply heat higher, you're going to get more convection. So that's a kind of neat added element, that it's kind of hybrid conduction convection, and it's somewhat variable and controllable by the user. And so although the cap is secured fairly well, we really don't recommend that you ever tip it over, and so these little nodules here are grips and twirling. We call them the twirling bumps, and they're there to help give you some grip and to keep your fingers an appreciable distance away from the high-powered torch that you need to operate this technology. And so pretty happy with this, because what this allows this device to do is for this entire cap to be heated. The whole thing, top to bottom, can be hot. And so there isn't this continual heat sink, big massive glass that's below it that's continually pulling heat out. And so your first draw is really fairly chirpy, and your second one is just immense, and it's because this cap can retain its heat because it's not being synced out, and any of the heat that is, if any appreciable amount, being synced out, it's from the cap through the cap shim, so it's conduction below the herb. And so this allows conduction to come up from the bottom and convection to come up from the top, and really allows a really uniform vaporization of the herbs, which is really what we're all after. And so this is, I think, the key piece of the DAB.erb technology that differentiates it from the competition, not only, but it also really, I think, sets the bar for the performance in this new technology.